Welcome to Satya IS Academy. I am PC Misra and we'll discuss about environmental science. Right now we'll discuss about as the topic is concerned right now. The topic is ecological succession. After finishing this topic, again we'll go for 5 bits so that you can evaluate yourself or know yourself better. If you look at this ecological succession term, you can find that it is having 2 consecutive terms. One, of course, pertaining to ecology. So whatever the characteristics of ecology are there, you will have to stick with them. And then the second one, the new term is here, that is of course succession, a new term. Ecology already we have discussed that 2 preconditions are there for the study of this subject. First one, of course, the organism. The second one, of course, the environment. And in the previous discussion, we have already discussed that we are not talking about the organisms or environments separately. Actually, we are talking about the interrelationships between them. So here, the interrelationships between these 2, I mean organisms and environment, is nothing but ecology. So after knowing this ecology, of course, we will go for the new term, that is succession. Remember, succession is nothing but a kind of progressive origination of any biotic community. So in a nutshell, we can say that ecological succession is the progressive origination of a biotic community. We have already discussed that whenever we are talking about the biotic community, we are referring to the organisms only. And those organisms may be in the form of plants or in the form of animals. So once we are talking about the succession, let's go for the real meaning of this succession. But before that, we must discuss one thing here, that this term came only in the year 1960. The United States biologist was there and ecologist was there, which was named as Frederick Clements. So here we can put the term like this. The term was coined by Frederick Clements. He was hailing from USA in the year 1960. And the basic meaning of this succession means, I told you, that succession means progressive, not regressive, progressive origination of a biotic community. A biotic community in a specified area. In a specified area. Remember, if there is an origination of biotic community, any of the biotic communities, that means abiotic components must be there. Because without the availability of water, without the availability of air, without the availability of soil, we could not sustain our life. And that's why when you say that the origination of a biotic community is taking over there, that means we are justifying one thing very clearly, that abiotic components are very much present over there. So if you are talking about the biotic component, in per se you are talking about the abiotic components as well. So if any biotic community is getting originated in a particular area, that means it is the process of succession. So how this process actually takes place, we'll discuss that one later on. But before that, it is better to define ecological succession in a pragmatic manner. So as far as the ecological succession is there, we can make it like this. A progressive origination of a biotic community, or simply you can say an organism as well, in a specified area, and when you are talking about a specified area, that means you are talking about the real ecosystem. So it is nothing but the ecosystem you are talking about, the pond, the forest, the mountain, etc. So organism in a specified area is called as ecological succession. Is called as ecological succession. So it is actually the scientific definition of ecological succession. If you look into this definition, you can find that the origination of biotic community is there, but remember, simply putting origination is not enough. You will have to put progressive origination. That means the very first biotic community would come into that area, then again migration would take place. A huge migration would take place, provided availability of resources are there. So once the availability of resources are there in that particular area, obviously another biotic community will also come. And that's why what would happen? Actually, the succession would taking place again and again. And while doing so, obviously whatever the structure of that ecological part is there, or that ecosystem is there, that a specified area is concerned, the very nature of that area would be altered. It may be positive, it may be negative as well. Okay? So that's why we are putting the term progressive origination of biotic community or an organism in a specified area, that is nothing but an ecosystem, which is known as ecological succession. Now just look into the real process of that one, how it actually takes place. And to visualize that one, we are again taking one example. Suppose this is a barren land. Nothing was there. Although soil is there, air is there, so abiotic component were present over there. In terms of soil, in terms of oxygen, in terms of water, in terms of sunlight. So abiotic components were already present over there into that barren land, but not a single biotic community was there. Now what happens? Suppose a single seed is actually thrown onto this one. So suppose a seed of any particular crop is actually coming into that area, and as the soil is there, the oxygen is there, the water is there, the sunlight is there, what would happen? Obviously that soil would actually getting germinated. So the seed has actually taken the form of a plant in that particular area, which was earlier totally barren. But now remember, it would not be considered as a barren land, because now the biotic community has come into that area because of the availability of those abiotic factors or components. So once a plant is actually originated over there, remember this plant is nothing but a kind of organism. And if origination of any organism is taking over into that particular area, which was earlier totally barren, that means this is nothing but a kind of biotic component. So because of the origination of that plant, or because of the origination of an organism into that area, of course biotic component is also seen over there. So earlier remember only the abiotic component were there. Now the biotic components are also seen over there, and I told you that once these two factors are seen in a particular area, obviously there will be some sort of interaction between these two components. What kind of interaction would be there? So the interrelationships would certainly develop here. Interrelationship. What kind of interrelationships? Remember, this is a plant, and we all know that if a plant is there, the plant would surely go for the process of photosynthesis. And while doing so, of course, it is giving you oxygen as well as some food. Remember, this oxygen is actually taken over by the animals while the process of respiration is going on. So this is a kind of exchange between the animals and of course the plants. And as far as the animals, suppose this is being taken over by the animals. So if the animals have taken this oxygen, remember they will release what? They will release CO2, carbon dioxide gas, which is actually a toxic gas. And that CO2, remember, during the process of photosynthesis would be taken over by the plant. So kind of interrelationships has been generated due to the origination of this plant community only. And that's why we are saying that whenever this kind of interrelationship is seen, where there is some sort of exchange between the entities, and if another plant community is coming over there and another animals are coming over there, remember that means there is a progressive origination of biotic community. Remember one thing, if a plant has getting originated over there, because of such type of interrelationships, there is a big possibility that another plant will also grow here. Then another plant would also grow here. And as the number of plants is growing day by day over that area, obviously there is all probability that from the nearby areas, whatever the kind of animals are there, they would also assemble into that particular area. So earlier, that barren land, which was not having even a single plant, is actually now getting crowded with many types of plants as well as animals. So this is nothing but the kind of progressive origination of the biotic community. And once it is taking place, that means we are talking about the succession only. But as by the process of this succession is concerned, it is taking place in 5 stages. So first we will discuss about the process of this succession. Then we will go for the very nature of the succession process. And then finally we will discuss the types of succession, which is actually 2. One is called as primary succession, the other one is called as secondary succession. So let's go for the stages of succession. So we are taking over here another subtopic, stages of ecological succession. And I told you that this ecological succession is actually taking place in 5 stages. So the very first, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, and of course the 5th one. What's the first one? The first one is actually called as nudation. The second one is called as, the second stage of succession is called as migration. The third stage is called as stasis. The fourth stage is called as reaction. And the 5th stage is called as stabilization. So remember, these 5 are the stages of ecological succession. We'll just refer to these 5 terms in a very nutshell. When you talk about nudation, I told you that suppose a barren land is there. It was having the abiotic components, remember, but there was no biotic component at all. But due to the origin of a simple plant, you may call, now this could not be considered as a barren land. So nudation means whenever the process of succession takes place, generally it is taking place in a nudent area, in a naked area, which is actually taken to be as a barren land. So process of succession generally taking place in a barren land only. And whenever it is taking place in a barren land, it is called as nudation. Now the second one, that is migration. I told you that if a single plant is getting originated over there, that means there is all possibility that from the other areas migration would take place, because due to this origination of plant, because of natural pollination, another plant would grow over there, another plant would grow over there. That means the population of plant community would surely enhance or increase. And once the population of plant community is getting increased, that means there is all probability that from the local areas or nearby areas, whatever the stock of animals are there, they would actually try to migrate to, or they would try to shift to this local area or this specified area. Once this process is taking over there by the animals, of course it is called as migration. So because of succession, the animals, and of course animals are there. Suppose another plant should come out, or plants are getting migrated to that specified area. And if it is taking place like this, that means there is a kind of migration. Then the third stage, that is stasis. Once different types of plants or different types of animals are getting settled over there, they would try to establish themselves. And this process of establishment of these plants as well as animals would be surely called as stasis. So as far as the stasis is concerned, we can define it as establishment of plant and animal communities in that particular area. And the process is known as stasis. After they are getting established, I mean the plants as well as the animals, remember there will be alteration of the environmental condition in that particular area. Just imagine here, suppose there was no biotic component at all. So as far as the availability of oxygen is there, or availability of CO2 is there, of course it was very, very less. But because of this origination of a plant community, a single plant community, you can say that as the plant community is there, it would go for the process of photosynthesis. Because of this photosynthesis, obviously, the concentration of oxygen in that particular area would surely increase. And whatever the kind of CO2 was there earlier, obviously, as far as the CO2 is concerned, because under the process of photosynthesis, they require what? They require CO2. So whatever the concentration of CO2 is there, of course, it would come down. It's a kind of interrelationship again between the biotic and abiotic component, and that's why I can say that whenever the kind of succession is taking place, obviously there would be alteration of the environmental conditions also. That means the very environment of that particular area would surely be changed. And this is the basic feature. This is one of the foremost feature as far as the process of succession is concerned. And remember, since it is not taking place in a year or two, the process of ecological succession actually takes hundreds and thousands of years. That means, as far as the alteration of environmental conditions are concerned, of course, it would be enhanced, or it would be going from one side to the other side, and it would remain continue for longer years. I mean, thousands or hundreds of years. That's why this is the most significant part of this ecological succession process. And finally, we'll take that one. As far as the reaction is concerned, I told you that once they are getting established, obviously there will be some sort of reaction among the biotic and abiotic components. Obviously, the concentration of abiotic components would surely be changed, or you may call the environmental conditions would surely be altered. And this is nothing but reaction. So, here you can put environmental conditions are getting altered, and when it is getting altered, the process is being known as reaction. And finally, we are talking about stabilization, and I told you that as the progressive origination of plants and animals is taking place in that particular area, finally they means the plants as well as animals, they would finally try to settle them permanently into that particular area. So a tendency, while going for stabilization, a tendency to settle them out in that particular area permanently. That is all about stabilization. So the very crux of this ecological succession, we may put it as under. Because whenever the process of succession is taking place, remember one thing, there will be always a possibility of alteration of the environmental conditions. So we will take this point very soon. But before going into that details, it would be better for us now to go for the real nature of succession. So here you will go for, after the stages, nature of ecological succession. I'm drawing here a simple diagram so that you can visualize it very, very easily. These two are the limits. Suppose this is the first community and this is the last community where the succession is actually getting matured. This is at the carrying level or carrying capacity, you may call. Here is a term that is called as carrying capacity, we'll define that one. And there is one that is origin point or point of origin. I told you that if a barren land is there and if any of the communities or any of the species, or you may call it individual, is coming into that particular area, that could be considered as a plant generally. Because if a plant is there, only then there is a possibility of food material or food resources. And if the food resources are available, only then the animals will accompany that area. And that's why generally whenever the succession takes place, it is starting with the plants only. And that particular plant, the very first plant in that particular area, that particular plant would be called as the pioneer component. So here you can make, this is actually the pioneer community. So the very first, we'll define that one. The very first plant generally in a specified area where there was no plant, where there is no biotic component. So the very first plant community is generally termed as a pioneer community. Then what will happen? I told you that when a plant is getting originated over there, it would consume the resources. And because of the consumption of the resources in that particular area, obviously there is all probability of the multiplication of those plants through the process of natural pollination. So from one plant, there may be the possibility of another plant of the same species. There is also a possibility that another seed may come which is of different nature, and that would also grow in that particular area. So you may call a blend of plants or a plenty of plants would actually grow into that particular area. And if it happens, it would not happen in a year. It would actually become a regular feature. So from one plant you can find that different types of plants of different species may come into that area. So from one plant, obviously, another plant would come. From another one, another plant would come. So the plant community would getting enhanced. And there would be the last community, which I told you that at the carrying capacity level, there will be another community which is getting originated over there. And if at the carrying capacity level we are talking about another plant community or another plant or animal community, it will be taken as, this was the prime one, the first one was called as pioneer community, and at the carrying capacity level, whatever the kind of biotic component is being seen, it will be called as climax community. Climax community. We'll discuss that carrying capacity here now. So climax community means it may be a plant. I told you that pioneer community is generally a plant, because once a plant is there, it is actually self-sufficient in producing its own food because of the presence of the chlorophyll. So there is no possibility of even a single animal which could be originated without the origination of the plant. So generally we are saying that ecological succession means whenever the pioneer community is seen in a particular area, generally it would be a plant only. So a pioneer community in a particular area under the process of ecological succession is generally a plant only. And once the complexity of the plant derivatives is getting increased, obviously number of plants would increase into that area. And as time progresses, a series of plants as well as animals could be seen into that particular area. That means the complexity of the nature, the complexity of the environment, the complexity of the environmental conditions would definitely be changed. It would become more complex. So we can say that the succession is actually taking place in a particular area from a less complex stage to a more complex stage. And once from less complex stage to a more complex stage, we are moving ahead in a particular area. Remember, at the carrying capacity level, whatever the last community is shown, is seen over there, that could be termed as a climax community. It may be a plant, it may be an animal as well. What do you mean by that carrying capacity? We all told you that when the very first plant was there, of course, abiotic factors were there. Rain was there, sorry, water was there, air was there, soil was there. So the availability of abiotic resources was very much abundant over there. But once the number of plants as well as animals increases, obviously the availability of those resources may come down. So as the population of biotic community getting increased, obviously the availability of resources would surely come down. So what I am trying to say, that during the process of, here you can make a point here, during the process of succession, what would happen? I told you, number of biotic entities, maybe plants, maybe animals, would of course increase. And once biotic communities number increases, that means they will consume the resources, available resources. So the second aspect, that is availability of resources in that particular area is concerned, of course it would come down because the population is getting increased. So once the population is getting increased, that means availability of resources would come down. And that's why if biotic components or biotic entities number increases, that means the availability of resources in that particular area would surely come down. So there will be a critical value of resources. Critical value means once the population is getting enhanced, suppose over here. So if the population of plants as well as animals is getting increased beyond this carrying capacity level, that means what? That means the succession would take place. But remember, that succession, that ecological succession would be very much disastrous. That means the succession process would be getting fragmented because it has been exploited very badly, or you may call it has been exploited very ruthlessly. So once a ruthless exploitation of any resources is being there, of course there is all possibility that the succession process would be fragmented, and it is not good for the very health of that particular ecosystem. That's why it is very much advisable that at the carrying capacity level, where the availability of resources is matching with the number of population of plants as well as animals, if it is in equilibrium, there is no problem. Once it is infringing that carrying capacity level, and if the population is still increasing, that means it would definitely fragment that ecosystem, which is not good for the entire ecosystem. So what I am trying to say, because the matter is very much complex now, I told you, once you are talking about the process of or the very nature of ecological succession, you will have to mention two things first. One is of course the pioneer community, which is the very first biotic community. Generally it would be a plant only, because the plants are only very much capable of producing their own food in any particular area, and that's why they could be considered as the pioneer community. As the number of plants as well as animals increasing in that particular area, obviously there is all possibility that whatever the resources were available over there, that could be consumed. And if it is being consumed, that means at the carrying capacity level, this is in equilibrium. I mean resources as well as population, they are in equilibrium. But once the population is getting increased or going beyond this carrying capacity level, obviously that would be detrimental for that would be very much detrimental for the entire ecosystem. And that's why we may mention the climax community here. Climax community means that particular plant or animal, individual or organism, that particular plant or animal as an individual, which is found at the carrying capacity level, so that the ecosystem is in equilibrium, would be termed as the climax community. And remember, I told you that going from the pioneer community to the climax community, obviously a number of intermediate communities could be seen over the span of time, because the process of ecological succession is almost unstoppable. It is going on further and further. And so it may take from here to here, it may take thousands of years, I told you, thousands of years. And if it is taking thousands of years, there could be possibility of many of the intermediate communities. For example, suppose this one is I1, intermediate 1, intermediate 2, intermediate 3, intermediate 4, intermediate 5, intermediate 6. So many intermediate communities are there. So in between the pioneer community and of course the climate community, whatever the intermediate communities are there, and that is very, very important. They have asked, in fact, UPSC has asked several times this question. So whatever the communities are seen in between the pioneer community and the climate community, remember those communities are termed as serial communities, or simply you could say CD. So remember, this is actually called as CD or serial communities. So we have three terms now. One is climate community, the other one is the CD or serial community, and the third one of course is pioneer community. So this is very important. As far as the ecological succession is concerned, I think this the nature of ecological succession, this subtopic is very, very important. So I am taking my time and I am just concluding this by putting things in a very schematic manner, a very simple manner. So let's go for the first one. I mean the pioneer community. I told you that whenever ecological succession process is going on, there is all probability that the very first community which could be seen in a particular area, I mean particular ecosystem, would be a plant community only. I told you, a plant community, not an animal community, because a plant is having the capacity to synthesize its own food due to the process of photosynthesis, because of the availability of those abiotic resources. So once a plant community is grown into that area for the very first time, I told you that that plant community would be considered as a pioneer community. Generally, a pioneer community, you will have to say, during the process of or under the process of ecological succession, generally the pioneer community is actually a plant community only. As the number of plants and as the number increases, of course the animals would actually accompany into that area. So as the number of plants as well as animals increases in that particular area, obviously there could be many more intermediate communities which could be seen into that particular area during thousands or hundreds of years as far as the maturity of the succession is concerned. And those intermediate communities would simply be called as CD, or you may call them the serial communities. And at the carrying capacity level, carrying capacity means it actually indicates the very equilibrium of the ecosystem, where the resources are matching with the population of, or you may call entities of that particular area. So at the carrying capacity level, where there is equilibrium of resources and of course population, so at the carrying capacity level, when any particular plant or animal community is grown, and if beyond that carrying capacity level, the population increases, suppose, obviously it would be a stage of fragmentation of the ecological succession process, or you may call the fragmentation of the ecosystem as a whole. That means it would be that particular plant or animal community would be called as a climate community. So when you are defining the climate community, you have to say that at the carrying capacity level, the kind of plants or animals or the kind of individuals which are actually seen into that particular area, they could be considered as a climate community. So three communities you will have to deliver under the ecological process. One is the pioneer community, the very first community into that particular area, utilizing those abiotic resources. Obviously there would be plants only. Then the intermediate community, because the process of succession takes place thousands and hundreds of years, and that means whatever the intermediate communities are there, they could be considered as the CD, or you may call serial community. And finally I tell you that as the population of plants as well as animals increases, obviously there is all possibility that whatever the kind of abiotic components are there or resources are there, they are getting down, they are coming low. And if the very concentration of resources is is decreasing, that means obviously as the maturity of the ecosystem is concerned, it is seen over there. And if still the population increases, obviously there is all possibility that it will fragment the ecosystem, which is very much disastrous for the entire ecosystem. So, and now if you start from the pioneer community via Cedar community to the climax community, you could see that this process of succession is a very slow process, you may call it. And if it is a slow process, it may take maybe thousands or hundreds of years. And that's why we can say that whenever these communities are growing over there, they are very much capable of altering the very nature of the environmental conditions over that area. That's why they may ask you one question, that if ecological succession takes place, what could be the best alteration, or what could be the kind of alteration you could visualize over there. So you will have to say that whenever ecological succession process is taking place in a particular area, there is all probability that environmental conditions of that particular area may change or may alter. That is for sure. One more thing you will have to say, that whenever we are saying that we are moving from the pioneer community to the climax community, of course the very nature of environment is getting changed or getting altered. Then they may ask you that if the foremost environmental condition which were there at the pioneer community level, whether it would come again. That means whether it's a reversible process. Remember one thing, one very important aspect I am telling you, that ecological succession process is actually an irreversible process. It's not a reversible process. That means if because of ecological succession, environmental conditions are getting altered, remember they are altered forever. You will not be in a position to get the same environmental condition again. And that's why one very important aspect we will have to put over there is that under this nature of ecological succession is that this is the crux of course, the very nature of ecological succession is actually irreversible. That is, as the process of succession alters environmental conditions of a particular area, it is altered forever. By no means the same kind of environment could be restored in future again. This alteration, don't think that it may be vast, it may be very, very, small as well. So this alteration could be slight or vast depending upon the rate of succession over here. Okay, so this was the very nature of ecological succession. To the last segment of this topic, I mean ecological succession, we are emphasizing over here the types of ecological succession, and then we'll move for today's part, that is ecological niche. So let us go for another subtopic here, and that is ecological succession types. As far as the ecological succession is concerned, it's of two types. The first one is called as primary succession, and the second one is called as secondary succession. And to distinguish these two, we are here again starting with an example. Let's have one barren land over here. A barren land. If a barren land is there, I told you that abiotic factors could be there. Whatever the abiotic factors are there. There is not a single biotic community. But because of the ability of these abiotic factors, suppose what happens? Suppose there is a bird which is passing through. Suppose this is your barren land. So abiotic factors are there, abiotic components are available over there. Water is there, air is there, soil is there, sunlight is there, humidity is there, everything is there. But not a single plant community or animal community was seen over there. That means it could not be studied under ecology, because I told you earlier that if we are talking about ecology, there must be the presence of both biotic as well as abiotic factors. And not only the presence, their interactions or their interrelationships are very much important. But here, only the abiotic components are there because it's a barren land. But now what happens? Suppose a bird is passing through this barren land. And if a bird is passing through this barren land, it is carrying a kind of seed into its beak. Accidentally, that seed is fallen over there, into that particular barren land only. So remember, if the seed has come out here, and the abiotic components are available over there, what would happen? This seed will surely germinate. So if this seed has germinated, that means the progressive origination of a plant community is taking place. And I told you that once a plant is getting originated into that barren land, obviously that plant could be considered as, because this is the very first plant, so that could be considered as the pioneer community. And as the time progresses, obviously another plant will come here, and as the number of plants increases, obviously as the scope of food material increases, surely from the nearby area, what would happen? Many of the animals would come into that area. So not only the plants, but also the animals could be seen into that particular area. So earlier, if you compare, earlier there was only abiotic factor, but now both abiotic as well as biotic factors are present over there, and not only the presence, obviously the interrelationships are also seen. And remember that the classical example of study of what? Organisms as well as environment, and not only these two, but also the interrelationships between them. And that's why we can say that this is now this is now come under the scope of ecology, because biotic, abiotic, and of course interrelationships are being seen over there. So once it is seen over there, remember one thing, when we are talking about a primary succession, we can say one thing, that since it is primary in nature, the succession we know, origination or origination of biotic community in a particular area where there is no. So if there was not a single biotic community earlier, but now they are being seen for the very first time in a particular area, obviously such type of succession would be called as primary succession. So once you have to define the primary succession, you can say, here you can go, the process of succession taking place for the very first time in a particular area is called as primary succession. So here, for the very first time, you will have to visualize this one. So if the succession is taking place in a particular area for the very first time, remember it would be termed as the primary succession. As far as the secondary succession is concerned, since the term secondary is there, that suggests one thing, that earlier succession process has already taken over there. But right now, presently, there is no such traces of any biotic community in that particular area. It may happen. For example, suppose a fire takes place in a forest. What would happen? Because of that fire, of course, many of the biotic community would surely disappear. And if in that devastated forest, again the process of succession takes place. So remember, it is not taking place for the first time now. It is taking place for the second time. So once the process of succession is taking place for the second time, remember the process of succession would then be termed as the secondary succession. So once we are talking about the secondary succession, we may justify the term suppose a forest is there, so it's a kind of ecosystem obviously. Earlier there were plants, there were animals, and of course the abiotic factors both. So abiotic factors were there, biotic factors were there. Because of some fire, or you may call hurricane, or you may call typhoon, or you may call flood, what happens? This biotic community is getting eroded. So there is only the presence of abiotic component in that particular area. And remember, if there is no biotic component, only the presence of abiotic component is there, now this could not come under the scope of ecology. Because I told you that ecology means the presence of biotic as well as abiotic components, and not only the presence, obviously the interrelationships between these two components. So as the fire had devastated all the biotic components, so only the presence of abiotic components could be seen over there. And that's why we can say that earlier there was the process of succession, but right now there is non-presence of any biotic community. Remember one thing, once the fire catches into that forest or forest land, whatever the biotic components are there, maybe plants, maybe animals, they would actually getting burnt. And once they are getting burned, obviously some ash would be formed over there. And remember, this ash is actually the residuary part of the body of those plants and animals. And this ash must have many of the components such as carbon, such as hydrogen, such as chlorine, such as sulfur, such as nitrogen. All these are the basic elements. That means the very presence of those basic elements are there into that particular area, which are acting like as nutrients. Nutrients for whom? Nutrients for obviously the plants. So now there is no trace of any biotic community. Earlier it was there, but right now presently there is no trace of any biotic community. Now just look at here. If such is the condition, it would not come under the purview of ecology, because only the presence of a biotic component is there. Now what happens? Again the same feature, if you remember. Suppose a bird is moving across that land where there is no presence of any biotic community. And if that bird is actually having a seed into its beak, and that seed is actually accidentally falling into that area, remember, because of the presence of these nutrients, there is all possibility that if a seed is actually getting over there into that area, because of these nutrients, obviously there is all possibility that the seed may grow up. That means the very presence of, now you can say, this is nothing but a kind of plant, the very presence of biotic component is seen over there, and since this is the very first plant into that particular area, remember this would be called as the pioneer community. So if a pioneer community is getting originated, obviously it would start the process of succession. And remember one thing, this pioneer community has not come here for the very first time. Earlier it is also seen over there, and that's why we can say that since this process of succession is taking place here for the second time, and that's why the process will become the secondary succession. So we can say, just to analyze or just to define this secondary succession, the process of succession being taking place for the second time, not for the very first time, is called as secondary succession. Now, what they would ask you? They would ask you one question from this segment. I mean, the types of succession. They may ask you that whether the rate of primary succession would be faster than the rate of secondary succession or not. Remember one thing, whenever they are talking about the rate of succession, always remember one thing, that the rate of secondary succession would be much faster than that of the first, or you may call the primary succession. This is because whenever secondary succession is taking place, there is all possibility that this S would be seen over there. And this S is having or comprising of many of the nutrients. These nutrients are very much helpful in the growth of the plant community. And that's why it has been seen that once secondary succession is taking place, it is taking place very much fast. That's why, just to summarize the whole thing, at the end of this ecological succession, we would put the things simply as conclusion. This could be the rate of secondary succession is much faster than that of the primary one. Why? This is so because of the presence of as, or you may call them carcass, full of nutrients for the plants. So this was another topic from ecology. To the last leg of this ecology session, we'll come to another aspect that is called an ecological niche.